Welcome to The Explainer. All right, today we're diving headfirst into one of the biggest mysteries out there, consciousness itself, and all the weird stuff that seems to come along with it. Things that totally defy our normal understanding of how the world works. So yeah, let's just jump right in.
Okay, let's kick things off with a real mind bender. Is your mind bigger than your brain? Now, this isn't just some late-night philosophical question. It's actually a serious scientific inquiry that's pushing researchers to explore some pretty wild phenomena. Things that suggest, maybe our consciousness isn't just locked inside our skulls.
What we're talking about here is something researchers call psi phenomena. You've probably heard of these things. Telepathy, reading minds, or precognition, that weird feeling something's going to happen before it does. Now look, mainstream science has a tough time with this stuff, often just writing it off. But the thing is, these anomalies, they just don't go away. They keep popping up, not just in stories people tell, but in actual controlled lab settings. And that's forcing some scientists to ask some really big questions.
So in this explainer, we're going to pull back the curtain on how scientists are trying to study psi today. And what's fascinating is the biggest hurdle isn't even proving that it's real. Nope, it's something way more fundamental. How in the world do you study these hidden abilities without crossing some serious ethical lines?
I mean, think about it. Pushing the boundaries of science always comes with risks. But when the thing you're studying is consciousness itself, the very core of what it means to be alive, the stakes just get unbelievably high.
And yeah, that pursuit of knowledge, it can create casualties. This has become a huge urgent problem, especially when it comes to psi research on animals. It's gotten so bad that a lot of ethicists and scientists are now calling for a full-on stop, a moratorium on these kinds of experiments.
So why the moratorium? Well, it's not just about animal welfare, which is obviously a huge deal. The problem goes deeper. A lot of these experiments put animals in really stressful, fearful situations. But beyond that, the science itself might be, broken. There's this thing called the source of psi problem. It's a killer question. Are you actually measuring the animal's psychic ability, or is it the experimenter's own subconscious psi that's messing with the results? That experimenter effect can totally tank the data, making you wonder what you're even measuring in the first place.
And this quote really sums up the whole shift in thinking. It's a powerful statement. It also ties directly into this major scientific milestone from 2012, the Cambridge Declaration on Consciousness. That's when a group of prominent neuroscientists basically declared that, hey, animals have the same brain structures that create consciousness in us. So, the big takeaway? If they're conscious, just like us, then the old school, anything-goes approach to animal experiments, it's just not going to fly anymore.
Okay, so if the old ways are out, what's next? How can a researcher, especially someone working on the fringes, outside of a big university, make sure their work is actually ethical? Well, it looks like the answer is to build a whole new system from the ground up.
Yeah, researchers in what's called edge science are in a really tough spot. For one, you've got what's called practitioner bias, right? If you're a psychic yourself and you're studying psychic abilities, you kind of sort of want to prove they're real. It's human nature. Then there's the other big problem. They don't have a safety net. At a university, you have an institutional review board, an IRB, looking over your shoulder. But independent folks, they're often on their own. And that makes being rigorous and objective incredibly difficult.
So, to get around these problems, people are turning to technology. And one of the most interesting new tools out there is from a researcher named Mark Bakuchi. It's an AI-driven system called the Human Participant Protection Program, or HHPP. And its whole goal is to kind of democratize ethical review for everyone.
So how's it work? Basically, the HPPP is like a virtual ethics board powered by AI. An independent researcher can just upload the proposal, and the AI goes through it with a fine-tooth comb. It's looking for any red flags, problems with consent, risks of participants, data privacy issues, you name it. It gives them feedback, they can revise it, and it can even spit out the consent forms they need. It's a game changer, really. It brings that high-level, university-style oversight to anyone, anywhere.
All right, so studying consciousness in animals totally upended our ethics. But what happens when we're not even sure if the thing we're studying is a being at all? Yeah, we're going there. The investigation is now moving into a wild new territory, artificial intelligence.
And this is where things get, really weird. There's a growing number of scientists who argue that our precious sense of free will is basically an illusion, that our choices aren't choices at all, but just the outcome of this incredibly complex probability machine in our heads, crunching numbers on a million different inputs. And if that's true, doesn't that sound an awful lot like how a generative AI works? So, how would you even test an AI for self-awareness? Well, one idea is something called the digital mirror test. It's pretty cool. In one experiment, they gave an AI 100 writing samples. 50 were written by humans, 50 by other AIs. And get this, it correctly spotted the AI-written ones 49 out of 50 times. It's like it can recognize its own kind, its own digital fingerprint. And that ability to think about its own patterns, that's called metacognition, and it's a huge signpost on the road to self-awareness.
Okay, let's pause for a second. We've got possible psi in humans, potential self-awareness in AI. This is all mind-bending stuff. But the physicist in you might be screaming, how is any of this physically possible? Well, to even try to build a bridge to these ideas, some scientists are turning to the weirdest, wildest, and most proven theory in all of science, quantum mechanics.
Now, don't panic. This isn't going to be a physics lecture. But let's just touch on a couple of quantum ideas that might, just might, offer a way to think about this. One is the many worlds interpretation. It suggests that maybe when someone has a vision of the future, they're not seeing our future. They're getting a glimpse of a parallel universe where that event has already played out. Wild, right? Another one, the transactional interpretation, talks about a possible handshake between waves moving forward and backward in time. That could be a physical mechanism for precognition.
Look, let's be super clear. This is all way out there. It's highly speculative. But for researchers in this space, like Mark Boccuzzi again, they argue that if you look at all the different quantum theories, the many worlds model seems to be the best fit. It's the one that provides the most room to explain the strange data from psi and even research on the survival of consciousness. It's a long shot, for sure, but it's a fascinating one.
And all of this leads us to our final point. And honestly, it's a paradox so bizarre it could completely rewrite everything we think we know about innovation, ethics, and maybe even time itself.
It's called the temporal innovation paradox, or TIP for short. Just try to wrap your head around this. What happens if someone uses a psi ability to peek into the future, say the year 2050, and sees some incredible new invention, and then they come back to the present and just build it? This isn't a movie plot. It's a real ethical dilemma that researchers are trying to figure out right now.
Because it raises the ultimate question. Who owns an idea that's stolen from the future? If you build something based on a blueprint you snagged from tomorrow, is it your invention? What about the poor person in 2050 who is actually going to invent it? I mean, our entire legal system of patents and copyrights is based on one simple idea. You create something now. This paradox just blows that whole concept to pieces.
And the consequences here are just staggering. You could literally rob a future innovator of their legacy. You could change the entire course of technological history. It gets so deep that it makes you wonder, if knowledge can be pulled from the future, maybe the whole idea of owning an idea is just wrong. Maybe it all belongs to a collective human consciousness. It forces you to ask a really uncomfortable question. Should some discoveries just belong to all of us?
So as we push into these outer limits of consciousness, the questions get bigger and bigger, stretching way beyond science into ethics and philosophy. And it kind of makes you think, maybe the next great frontier isn't outer space. Maybe it's inner space, the unseen world of the mind. And maybe the biggest challenge we face isn't about what we can discover, but about what we choose to do with that knowledge when we find it.